One moment, I'm standing right next to the bench of this arm curl machine. And the next moment, I find myself in what I'll describe as a completely different dimension. And I felt like I was home. I knew. No one had to tell me, but I knew that what I was looking at was what I'll call the source of all creation. My name is Philip Hasheider. I am a farmer, a writer, local historian in the area in Wisconsin where I live. And the farm we have is grass-based, and we pasture graze beef cattle. After a career in dairying, about 25 years ago, we switched over. And interestingly, the beef cattle played an intricate part in my near-death experience, which I'm going to explain a little more in detail. But that's my background, and I've been on a farm almost all my life, other than going to college. That's pretty much where I'm based. I did not realize that the early October morning when I collapsed, that I would become an expert in dying. But I also realized later on that I became an expert in hope. And so the morning of my collapse, through really no fault of my own, happened after I did 20 modest arm curls at our local hospital's fitness center. It was monitored, and the question of why it happened at that precise time, in that exact location with all the available help, and not 1 hour earlier when I was out in our farm's pasture going to observe our 27 head of grazing beef cattle. Those are questions that really, afterwards, really challenged me, and it took me a long time to understand. Normally, every morning I would walk out in the pasture. It's about 56 acres of grassland, and check on the cattle to make sure everyone was okay and that there were no physical needs that were requiring attention. That morning I walked out there, and I didn't get 300 feet to them. They were all lying down in the grass. And one of them saw me coming, and she jumped up and looked at me, perked her ears forward, and took off running across the field. She went about 300, 400 feet, stopped, turned around, and looked at me. I mean, it's like my first impression, what's the matter? I mean, she looked like she had seen a ghost. Well, her actions caused all the others to become alert. So they all got up, they all looked at me, and they ran across to join her. And then they stopped, and they all stood there and looked at me like something was wrong with me. I had no idea what that was all about, because the morning before, I had walked amongst them, and I had talked to them, and I could scratch them, and they wouldn't pay me any attention while they were eating. But this morning was completely different, and I had no idea what that was all about. Well, I had seen what I needed to see, and everyone was okay. So I turned around and I walked back to our farmyard. And that morning I had scheduled to have the tires on our car replaced at a local service business in our local village, which is 12 miles away from our farm. So I went in the house, I changed clothes, went into town, realized that I was way early for my appointment. So instead of turning right to go get my tires changed, I realized I could turn left, go to the hospital's fitness center, and get in a quick workout session before I had to go for my appointment. So that's what I did. I went to the parking lot, uh, went downstairs, changed my clothes, went upstairs, said hi to the staff, and did some stretches and sat down at the arm curl machine. And one of the staff members came by and just corrected me on my posture. And I got done with 20 and I stood up next to the bench, and the strangest thing happened. I looked down at both of my forearms because they were tingling, like when you lie on them and then you get up and all of a sudden the blood rushes back and they start to tingle. Well, both of them were doing this. And that is the last thing I remember until much, much later that day. And I didn't realize I had collapsed. But one moment I'm standing right next to the bench of this arm curl machine. And the next moment I find myself in what I'll describe as a completely different dimension. I realized that this was a dimension that has no vocabulary. It's a dimension where all ideas, thoughts, as we would comprehend them, were instantaneously transmitted non-verbally. So in trying to explain to people what I experienced, I have to find human vocabulary words that can approximate what I saw and experienced. And that's been a real challenge when I was trying to explain it to people. So what I experienced in that dimension is an approximation of the words that I can find to explain it. So I found myself, one moment I'm here by the arm curl machine bench, and the next moment I'm in this amazing dimension. And if I could equate it to something, it was like I was floating. I was floating on a raft. And I was floating on not waves of water, but waves of energy. And these waves were coming towards me. They were continually coming towards me. But not only that, they were passing through me. And I thought that was really interesting because at that point, I still had not realized that I had left my body. Well, I sat there looking at these waves coming, and they were a combination of love, they were a combination of welcome, they were a combination of acceptance, and I felt like I was home. I didn't realize my body was still lying back at the fitness center floor, but it was such an overwhelming sense of warmth and love. And when I happened to look up, I mean, as we understand, looking at something in front of us, what I saw, I can best describe as a gigantic, and that's such a small word, this orb, this golden, reddish, pulsing orb, was emitting all of these energy waves that were encompassing the whole area I was looking at. It wasn't just passing through me, it was passing through all the space beside me, above me, below me. It was just emanating from this golden source. And from it, I saw these little sparks shooting out of it, like sparklers or little fireworks, fireflies, however you want to describe it, shooting out from all over the surface of this orb that filled up the whole dimension in front of me. It takes something to expand one's mind to consider an object that's that massive. But it was. And I realized that those little sparks were energies, were entities, were life forms of some sort that were going in all different directions. And at that point, I turned to look, as we understand, front, back, sideways, or whatever. I looked to see what was next to me. And the best way I can describe it to you is that it was an infinite multitude of dimensions in universes that were suspended in this eternal space right next to each other. To explain it would be like, okay, take everything we know about our universe here, all the planets, all the solar systems, all the galaxies, all the empty space, all whatever you can imagine as far as we can see in this universe, and then take all that and compress it down to a single sheet of paper, and then suspend that out here in this eternal space. Okay, and then do that with another one right next to it, and another one, and another one. And you keep on going in a lateral direction as we understand that, vertical direction as we understand that. And there's all of these dimensions and universes suspended in this space, but yet each one of them had an energetic filament that reached up and attached to what I'll describe as a spider web-like matrix that surrounded this golden glowing essence. And I realized at that moment, I knew, no one had to tell me, but I knew that what I was looking at was what I'll call the source of all creation, the divine creator, the God essence, whatever name resonates with you as the single source of origination energy. That's what I was experiencing. And it too was pulsing all of this love, welcome, knowledge, infinite knowledge into each one of these different universes suspended out in this space. I can't say that I remember being amazed. It's just that, yeah, that's what this is. And I'm part of it. And I'm part of whatever else there was here. Well, I decided to see what was behind me, as we understand front and back. And so I turned to look, and what I saw was infinity. And that's because the eternal essence, the emulsion of eternity, acted like a magnifying glass, so that the farther I looked, the clearer everything became. Imagine understanding to see the end of infinity. That's what I saw. I can't tell you how that all happened, but that's what I remember seeing. So at that point, I did understand that this is where I came from. This is where we all came from. I was, at one point, one of those little sparks that came out. You were one of those little sparks that came out. By that, I mean we all, each one of us here, carry the DNA of that creation energy. So we are all the same. We are all basically the same. As I was sitting there, it wasn't until much later that I realized that during this time I was enjoying this and observing and experiencing this eternal dimension. There were a dozen EMTs and hospital staff back there working on me. And I know this because I get all my medical reports to follow the timeline. And if I had known that at that point in time, it probably wouldn't have bothered me. I would have told them, don't bother. I like where I am. I don't need to come back. I couldn't call them to tell them that. I didn't have any control over that, which is really an interesting concept. But anyway, I was sitting there just absorbing and understanding all of what was happening. And then all of a sudden I was not there. And as I understand the timeline, that's when they restarted my heart, and that's when I returned to my body. So I had been on the longest trip I'd ever taken in 6 minutes. And I came back with an experience that would take me even longer to understand, and even longer than that to explain to anybody. And yet, it would be another 8 months before I would finally get the answers as to why I returned here and didn't stay there. And so that really pretty much covers the essence of my experience. Now, other people have said they've had multiple ones, and that's fine. I've had the one that I'm aware of, and I'm grateful for it. It gave me a whole new view of our essence. One of the things that I've learned, realized since my experience, is that the body is more, our bodies here are more than the sum of its parts. When I was standing next to the arm curl machine, next to that bench, I had all of the same body parts I had as a moment later when I was lying dead on the floor, except for one thing. The thing that was missing when I was on the floor was where I was in that dimension. It was my inner essence, my true self, my soul, if you want to put a name to it. That left. And that's where I was. That's the true part of me. And that's the true part of anyone else. But it had to go back when they restarted my heart. So that's why I only had this amount of experience in that dimension. I'm grateful for that. I mean, a lot of people had to go through a lot of anxiety and trauma and all that sort of that, including my family, for me to have that experience. But I'm grateful for having that realization.
Why do you think this happened to you?
That's an interesting question. I would not say that I'm chosen. I do not consider myself any more special than another person standing next to me. I had an amazing experience, but it doesn't make me, you know, higher than anyone else. I mean, I'm as much of a person as you are, and anyone else who listens to this. But it's an experience that I'm trying to share because I mentioned earlier that I became an expert in home, and that's what really this is all about. How I could transfer that information that I experienced there to here, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to explain because I don't know the physics and the dynamics of that, how you transfer a spirit energy into a human vocabulary. But it's what I'm trying to do. Because that experience is something everyone's going to have at the end of this existence. I've used an analogy before of in 1951, I decided as a spirit energy to drop down into this lower dimension to experience this life. I still don't have an answer as to why that happened or how that decision was made, but I know that's what happened to me. It's like I got off the energetic superhighway and dropped down into this off ramp, and here I am. So I was born of my parents. I was raised by them. I've experienced now over 73 and a half years of this lower energy dimension. But I know now that this is a temporary thing. I get this experience here. I'm allowed this. Everyone is allowed their experience. And when my body uses up its fuel, which it will, just like everyone else does, I will leave again. and I will get onto the on-ramp of that energetic superhighway, and I'm going to go on to another experience somewhere in one of these dimensions. I have no idea what it'll be, but it'll be great because it is part of my soul's learning experience as we continue forever. And I was thinking about this morning before we started to talk, is that trying to get a human mind to understand the full concept of forever or eternity is really difficult because we're so ingrained as in a human form to understand beginnings and ends. I mean, beginning for us is when we're born, the end is when we die. Well, that's only part of the story, and it's a really small part to me because I've had lives before and I existed in a different form. I'm not sure I can recall that, but my soul can because it's experienced it. And once it leaves here, it will continue to experience other things, just as you will, just as everyone else will. Now, this is not a religious topic. This is a spiritual aspect of us, that we are eternal beings. And that's the hope I'm trying to explain, is because this is not the end. When we're flat out on the floor not breathing anymore, this is not the end. We're just going to go on to somewhere else. I think we come here into this dimension because that is, and take a human form, a human body, because that is the only way we can really experience the tactile elements of this dimension, the emotional elements, the intellectual elements, because I couldn't do that in just a spirit state. Now, I think that you can come here as a spirit entity and see things, but I don't think you're going to experience it in the same way as, touch and that sort of thing. So there's a little side thing, but I do think that there are guardian angels. I think there are, whatever you want to call them, intelligent essences that surround us. I don't think they tell us what to do, but I think that they provide opportunities of choice. And I believe that because that morning I had the opportunity to turn right, but instead I took the opportunity to turn left. I had a choice. And because I took that opportunity to go left, there were enough people eventually around to save me. Now, had I gone to get the tires changed right away, I don't know, maybe the ambulance crew could have got there in time. Maybe it wouldn't have happened there. But the fact that it did happen in that specific point, that place, at that time, with all that help available, because the ambulance building was just across the street. I mean, there were a dozen people there working on me. And had that happened an hour earlier out in our farm's pasture, no one would have known. So going back to your question about it being a unique experience, but I'm just another human being. I don't think I'm any more special than anyone else. I mean, even though I had that extraordinary experience, I'm not given a free pass. I still have to pay my bills. I still have to go to work. I still have to put up with people I don't care for. I still have to handle my emotions. Even not everything is just hunky-dory or sugar-coated just because I had that experience. I still have to exist within the parameters of this dimension. But I have a different outlook. And to me, that is the whole essence of my experience. But yeah, it took a long time to understand exactly what happened and try to understand it in terms that I can handle. And then still wondering why. But again, it wasn't until 8 months later that I was given the answer as to why I did return.
And what happened after 8 months that answered your questions?
Briefly, after I left the hospital, I was in the hospital for 4 days. And an hour after my event, my blood pressure was back down to normal. What they found was 2 blockages in my heart. They put 2 stents in, and then 2 days after that, I was released. So they put me on some drugs to keep my blood pressure low, even though I had never had a problem with that. And over the next 6-7 months, I was really having trouble with the medications. I mean, I was sluggish. I couldn't hardly work. Mary, my wife, wouldn't let me outside by myself, and she had a full-time job. So she was always on, needle's edge as to what she would find when she got home. One morning, I came downstairs for breakfast, and I was my typical sluggish self. I mean, I was just dead tired all day long, and it's because my blood pressure was too low. The doctors would not believe that, but Mary could see it. Anyway, that morning I went down the stairs and I plopped myself into the chair at the end of the kitchen table. And I noticed she had a notepad in her hand, which she generally didn't have. And so she waited until I got settled, and then she asked, do you want to hear what you said last night? And I said, well, I don't remember saying anything. And she said, well, you did. And I said, okay, what did I say? Hope it wasn't anything bad. And she said, well, you sat up in bed and you were mumbling to yourself. So I grabbed my pad next to the bed and started writing down what you said, and all I had was mumbles on the paper. She said, then you stopped and you started to shake your head from side to side, saying, I don't believe it, I don't believe it, I don't believe it. And she asked me that night, or that morning, what don't you believe? And Mary said, I told her the reason I came back. And she said, what was that reason? And she said, I told her the reason I came back is I was told I needed to become a conduit of hope for those who don't have any and don't think there is any. And then she paused. And I said, and what else? She said, nothing. Shrugged her shoulders. She said, that was it. You lay back down, went back to sleep. After she told me that morning, everything made sense. And I understood fully why I was where I was at the time of my collapse, with all the help available, because if it happened out in the pasture, none of this would have, no one would have been able to save me. So there was a reason that I was in that place at that time. And the reason is for me to explain my experience to people and to say that this is not the end. None of us are lost. We are all going to go on, whether we want to or not. You don't have a choice in that. You're just going to go have a different experience. So that's the hope, that no one's lost. It doesn't matter what your situation is. I do want to say that I'm more interested in people keeping their minds open. I mean, I'd appreciate it if they did buy the book, but that's not my purpose. I want them to consider what else there is out there for each of us. And the whole thing is we need to support each other. We need to offer the hope to each other that, whatever our situation, here. There are other situations you'll be in after you leave here. So it's not, this is an experience. We come here to learn, and we take those lessons with us, whether we think so or not.
Thank you very much, Philip. How can people find more about your story?
I do have a book that's on Amazon. It's called 6 Minutes in Eternity. And I'm not pushing the book. It's available on Kindle and it's available on audiobook. If they'd like to write, they can get a hold of me at philiphasheiderbooks@gmail.com. And I'm also on Facebook at P. Hasheider Books. And they can look at your video and find the spelling of my name. It's not difficult, it's just what it is.